If you've been playing GD for any length of time, you've probably run into the physics doing some very strange things before. I think that most people just kind of brush it off in the moment. Most of the time it's just a weird death that feels bad because it shouldn't have been your fault. But I've always been so fascinated by them, and I've always kept a mental note of all the weird little things I find, and I try to work them into my own gameplay a lot. If you've been following my creations for a while, you're probably quite familiar with this, especially if you're one of the few people who were following me back in 2.1. This one's important to get out of the way very quickly. If you know me, you almost certainly know this one because I use it a ton. The dash orb S-block bug. If you have a dash orb that leads into an orb that has an S-block on it, it'll automatically activate that orb when you connect with the S-block. In order for this to work, you need to first place the S-block and then the other orb because of some weird priority thing. I believe another way to set it up is you can also turn on extended collision or something, but I don't do that, so I don't know. But either way, it's a genuinely incredibly fun mechanic, and I really recommend working it into your gameplay if you think it'd fit anywhere. It's very nice, it's very fast up and down movement, it feels very fluid, it feels very natural. It's a very good way to just get like a sudden burst of speed. A lot of you are probably going to be familiar with Robot Straight Fly. It was weakened in 2.2 and now requires you to disable Fixed Gravity Bug. With that caveat, it is still around and it does still work, though unlike in 2.1, it can't be activated from just walking up the slope anymore. It requires you to be upside down and to hit your head mid-robot jump without dying, so that can be an H block or just right after a gravity change. At that point, the rest of the robot jump will just be in a straight line. It's pretty fun and a pretty cool mechanic. Something much less well known, but that I've always been a big fan of, is the way you can abuse the iframes you get from a gravity change. If you aren't aware, when you change your gravity, there's a small period of time where it's impossible for you to die from bashing your head on the ceiling. And during that time, you can get some really weird clipping stuff, even though it's not to the same degree as you could in 2.1, unfortunately. An exciting side effect of this mechanic, though, is that it lets you jump on the frame that it teleports you back to the bottom of the block. And if you're moving fast enough, and if the block is thin enough, you can actually take advantage of that, and you can even chain several of that in a row. The ball stick bug was heavily weakened in 2.2, but you can still do it on screen borders for some reason. For those of you unfamiliar, if you buffer an input as a ball jumping towards the ceiling or floor, you'll switch gravity when you hit it and you'll stick to it. It's sadly not very useful anymore except in a few specific situations. Do you notice anything odd about this clip? Despite being a gravity-linked duel, they're slightly out of sync. How does that happen? Well, for some reason, when player 1's icon is the one that hits the gravity portal, it doesn't actually change its gravity until the next frame, while player 2's gravity changes right away. You can see that by the end of the clip, despite only going one frame apart at a time, they've become very far apart. Now on the topic of duels desyncing, let's talk about regular style duel desync. It's not useful in 2.2, but it is still cool as hell, and you can do this. What's actually going on here is that the game has a system for when the player does this jump, it wants to align you to land on the same pixel of the block as the one you jumped off of on the previous block. But it does this adjustment horizontally instead of vertically. And the setup for it uses those two block positions, with one block scaled up to 5 times its size to trick the game into thinking that the jump is happening on every frame, which pushes the player forwards to where we want it to go. When you do a ton of these jumps, you're actually slightly desyncing yourself from the song, but it doesn't really matter because it's such a small amount. You'll be getting more meaningful desync from just hitting any speed bottle ever anyway. Another fun duel bug is that if you pause while holding during a duel, keep holding, and then unpause while still holding, one icon will release its input and the other one won't, allowing you to have them be doing separate inputs. Fun to mess around with, but quite frightening to think about actually using in a level, although I have made something silly with it in the past. Something I love about GD's physics is that with the exception of the random trigger, everything always works the exact same, 100% of the time, it's always consistent. Except it isn't. This setup will buffer the orb precisely once, and then every subsequent attempt it will do absolutely nothing. It's only possible once per session. Over here I copy pasted the orb 5 times so that you can pass it 5 times, and then once you've hit it 5 times, you're out again. This one is kind of a nightmare because it did actually affect a good number of my old levels when the bug was introduced. Thanks, RobTop. Slope clipping is a whole massive thing that I won't get into detail here because I'd be here forever, but slopes are very buggy and you can clip through them a lot. It's difficult not to clip through them if you do anything except use the angled side. Moving on is to not get sidetracked about slopes. This one dubiously counts because you do need fixed gravity bug to be disabled for it to work, but while upside down, your Coyote frames will be maintained during dash orbs and robot straight flies. If you aren't familiar with Coyote time is the thing that lets you jump for a few frames even after you walk off the edge of a platform. It's a very normal feature for games to have, but GD's is weird because as far as I can understand, it's based on distance fallen instead of actual time in the air, hence you being able to keep it if you go in a straight line instead of fall. Downwards dash orbs don't count as falling, I guess. Fun fact about qalli time though, in platform mode there's still a 2.1 bug in the game, which is that with upwards momentum from some sources you'll keep your qalli time, allowing you to effectively double jump sometimes. Dash orbs on slopes will keep you stuck to the slope until the slope ends. Spider game mode and spider orbs will send you straight through solid blocks that have extended collision turned on, which is very cool and very useful for gameplay sometimes. I use it in a good amount of my own levels. If the robot's jump is ended early and then you keep holding, the robot's jump will be held onto. You can reactivate that jump with anything that sends the robot up except pads because Robot specifically fixed robot pads in 2.2. It still works with slopes and orbs though, and if you disable the fixed robot jump setting, you can get pads back too. This one's fun and useful in gameplay sometimes, and I do enjoy using it. For some reason, if you're holding from a spider orb while going down from a slope, then at the bottom of said slope your momentum will be set to 0 instead of you maintaining the slope momentum. This also works with black orbs, and I imagine any kind of non-cancelled input that lets you stay still on the slope. It's useful sometimes. What do you think will happen when I hit these dash orbs? You probably guessed correctly. What about if I buffer those inputs though? For some reason it gives a weird swingy motion. It also does this when you swift click them. I don't know why, it's quite fun to mess around with though. I've used it in a few levels before. The mini-wave hitbox is too small, it's tiny and stupid and I hate it, and it just fits through things that it shouldn't fit through. Exiting duels with player 2 sometimes causes issues, as what actually happens when player 2 exits a duel is that the game teleports player 1 to player 2's position and then disables player 2. It's supposed to give player 1 all of player 2's information before disabling it, but a couple things were missed, so they carry over from player 1. If you're hitting a dash orb or actively on a slope, then it'll carry over out of the duel portal. This one's useful in especially weird and gimmicky levels, and I do use the dash orb aspect of that sometimes. This one's very commonly known, but buffered jumps are higher. The rest of all of these were suggested by some of my friends because I asked in our server for some suggestions for my list. If you stack a spider orb and then another orb on top of each other and double click within a 1 frame window of each other, you'll hit the spider orb, and then during the qalli time of the other orb, you'll hit it in your new position. It works with the spider orb and any orb, even other spider orbs. It's quite hard, but if you're good at the game, it's very cool. For some reason, J blocks still don't work on slopes. Wave kinda sticks to steep slopes like this, but it's weird and not super consistent. Watch how far I get from this dash orb and how quickly I make it to the end. Now watch how much faster it is if I touch the slope first. Touching a slope makes the player slippery until you start moving. This isn't super unknown information in the plat community, but what might be less known is the fact that you keep your slippery state after death. Weird evil game. Checkpoints have hitboxes. This level by my friend is centered entirely around that fact. Now that's all of the individual quirks and bugs and gimmicks and whatnot, but it's worth noting that a lot of these can be used in combination with each other to get more strange interactions and mechanics, but they are fundamentally still these quirks. I highly encourage you to kind of mess around and experiment and combine some of these things with each other that I might not have thought to do myself. Have fun. Make something new. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I hope you learned something new. Maybe you just learned to hate Robot more, I don't know. But if you know of any that I missed, please let me know in the comments, because if I did miss enough, I will make another video about them. Anyway, until that happens, subscribe to see more from me. Thanks for watching. Bye!